kick that up to the cloud. Okay, I believe we are recording, so we're going to take a look at how to merge a multi-part article into one article. And so we've got these three parts. There's part 1 down here, part 2, and part 3. And what we want to do is keep the ability for people visiting these articles to be able to click on something that takes them to part 1 or part 2 or part 3 easily. But we want to put all this content together in one long blog article, which can be more beneficial for SEO purposes, and kind of go from there. So with that in mind, let's see, the easiest way I think to tackle this is I'm going to initially recreate or create a new article that's going to hold all three of these parts. And later, these old part 1, part 2, part 3s could be deleted if we want to. But so I'm only creating this other post to hold all these things. If you were doing this on your own, you wouldn't necessarily need to write 3 different parts and then copy paste them into one big part. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So to do that, I'm going to open up a new tab. So I'm going to create a new post, and I'm going to start that off in a new tab. So let that load in.
Excuse me.
Sure. All right, there we are. And you are running the new, is this the new Gutenberg editor, I believe?
This is the thing that showed up. I have no idea what it is.
Probably so. So have you done any writing with this yet?
Yes.
Okay.
I did to put this article, Brett, was very long. I put it into 3 parts, so I had to do a little bit within the different blocks. So
gotcha.
I've had that experience.
Okay, terrific.
So
we have for these articles, we have a discovering a new normal after experiencing a brain injury. And yes. I'm going to copy that title, but I'm not going to put the part 3, part 2, part 1 at the end of it because that'll be within this article. It won't necessarily be part of the title anymore. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay. So, and then we're going to have some blocks. So
I have a question for you?
Oh, sure.
In the future, if I create a long article, can I just, within the article, can I just say this is part 2, part 3, rather than dividing them out?
Definitely. And one of the things that I intend to show you today is how to make those parts that you would create the clickable parts.
Okay.
So we have different blocks or components, if you will, of what could be in an article, and all sorts of different things that they show. So we could have a heading of an article, and we could have paragraphs of a paragraph of text or multiple paragraphs, a quote, pictures, audio, video, etc. And within this article here, we have some of those types of things. So we've got some text. This is right here, strategies for discovering our new normal after a brain injury. That's kind of a header, or one way to look at it might be to look at that as a header. We've got this image with the solutions. I want to take a look at parts 1 and part 2 also as I bounce around. So in here we've got this image, which is the featured image for the article. So we have the initial write-up, some images, and then the article wraps up and ends here. And then we've got these navigational pieces here that talk about navigating into part 2, and in the other articles, part 3, right?
Yes.
So, and let me ask a quick question. This part here where it says you have my permission to share the articles, is that something that you add to the article too, or is this in a template? I don't recall.
No, this is what I add to all of my articles. It's basically my copyright statement
Okay,
for people.
gotcha. So as just a quick aside, that could be something that gets added to the very bottom of your page. That could go in a footer or something like that. It doesn't have to be with those articles. But you can't, it doesn't hurt it to leave it there too. And at a different time, we might talk about how to set up a template where you won't have to actually type or copy paste this every single time. It would just be there in the article, which might save you some time.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you,
Okay.
Brett.
So let's go in and edit this post real quick. Okay, so here we are. Here is that post. And I'm scrolling just to make sure I see everything. And as I click on it, then we see the editor here. I want to view this as HTML because when I view it as HTML, I can copy the whole thing. And I'll just make sure that's obvious. I'll use my mouse. And then over here, and this is our new article, our new real long article. We're going to come in here and just getting it started. I want to edit as HTML again and paste all of that in.
Yeah, this is, to be honest with you, it's becoming a little overwhelming for me.
Okay.
I don't want to necessarily mess things up by having HTML. I don't copyright the right.
Every post that we create has HTML, so this is just one way to view it.
Right. No, I understand that. But if I go over there and then I click something by accident in the process of trying to do this, and I don't include a particular character that I omit by chance,
Gotcha.
then it's going to mess the whole article up potentially.
Well, this could be true. So I copied and pasted that whole page in, and then via HTML, and then I converted it to blocks. So WordPress did its best to set it up as these blocks.
Right.
And once it has it as a block, we can kind of change a number of different things. We can move stuff around if we want to.
Right. I have a question for you. I noticed that there's two of the main image. Right.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that too. That wasn't intentional. That's some kind of mix-up on the part of WordPress. Let's see if we can, and it's not letting me click into that. This is the Gutenberg system, and frankly, it's a little new to me. I've done a little bit of work with it, but not a whole lot. So this initial text here they thought it should be a heading, but this is probably not a heading. This is more likely to be a paragraph.
No, actually, I want it as a heading because I have to do that at the very beginning for SEO. Because in the first paragraph, it's got to have the,
the first paragraph should have a heading, or it should have a topic that connects to explains what the main thing is about your article. But this is kind of a setup, isn't it? You talk about you interviewed someone.
They interviewed me.
Oh, yeah. They interviewed you. Okay, I've got that. I read that incorrectly. My mistake.
No problem, Brent.
So let's see. How do we get this image out of here? Because we've got an image that we don't need. Is it as simple as selecting it and removing it? That took it out all the way. We do need to set the featured image, so I'm gonna. There's our image for the featured image.
But then it's not showing up at the very beginning. when
Yeah,
I
well,
create,
I can add that again in just a second.
okay, this is unfamiliar to me. That's why I'm,
Yeah. Would this be better for you if you had the old editor running on your site still?
that would be great if I had the old editor working on my website.
Okay, well,
Can you get back to the classic editor?
it is possible.
Are they going to try to convert me into this new one every time they do an update, though?
well, the new one is something that will evolve over time and potentially replace the classic, but they do have a plugin to allow us, I'm double checking to see if it's already installed here. There's a plugin to run the classic way of doing it, the classic editor. So I'm checking to see
Thank
if
you, Brett.
already have it, and I don't see it, so let's add it. It's quickly becoming one of the more popular plugins out there. I'm just searching on the word classic editor, updated 12 hours ago. 800,000 people have already installed it. And okay, we'll activate it.
So that's the one rather than classic editor or add-on. What's the difference between those two?
There's different ways to. This is the official one.
Okay.
I understand. So, all right. So let's get back to our post. So we got let's check our settings too. That's something new. Convert emoticons, writing settings. So the default editor now will be the classic editor, but if you want to use blocks, you can turn the block editor on when you like. In the future, if you want to change that, you could have the block editor be the default.
And that's the Gutenberg, right?
Yeah, the new one, the block editor and Gutenberg are the same thing, basically.
So are they going to, down the way, when I get updates for WordPress, are they going to necessarily try to convert me into the Gutenberg and take away the classic editor?
Ultimately, Gutenberg is just part of WordPress. And so it's not so much trying to convert you, it's just if you want to use that part of WordPress or not. There's a lot of parts of WordPress that you don't use, and there's a lot of parts of WordPress that you've been using for a long time.
So they're not going to demand that I go that route, right?
Not that I know of, but that's why they have that classic editor plugin in the first place.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's go back to this draft that I started. Okay.
Excellent.
And now this looks more familiar to you, I suspect, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
terrific. And so what we have here is part 1 loaded in.
I can't drive, can I?
Not yet.
I'm driving right now. Okay. You see the cursor?
I don't think so. This is me.
Okay. Okay, I'm just driving on my computer, not where you're at. No.
Okay, so I copied in part 1. I'm gonna leave that page. I'm not changing anything on that first page. And I'm gonna come over here and for the moment, I'm not gonna leave this here, but I need to be able to see my work. So I'm gonna call this part 1 for the moment, but I'm not gonna leave that there. We're gonna delete this in a little bit, okay? And at the bottom of this, or we're going to change it eventually. Okay. So at the bottom, we won't need this anymore. This please read part 2 because we're going to have part 2 right here. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to put part 2 here because that's where part 2 is going to go in just a moment. And eventually we're going to have part 3 as well.
So that's a heading 1.
I'm just putting that there to make sure that this stands out because there's going to be a lot of text there, right?
Right.
We already have 800, almost 800 words. I don't know if you can see it in the counter here. Word count 789 in this bottom lower left-hand corner of WordPress, which is great. These for 2018, articles that do well for SEO have 900 to 1,200 words in them. That's like the new bare minimum. articles that do really well are even longer. People are taking more time to write in-depth articles. And you've been doing that for some time. And due to the way things used to work, you'd also then break them up into different parts, and also to help as a navigational aid for your audience. And so we're going to keep the navigational aid, but we're going to now give you that power that you've always had of these long articles, and we're going to put it all in one spot and kind of consolidate your power. So going into part 2. And so let's copy paste this as well. So I'm going to scroll down, select all of this all the way down to here. And we're going to put that right after part 2. And so I'm back in this new article again, and we're getting ready to add part 3 next.
So you're just doing it, excuse me, you're not going over to HTML, you're just copying and pasting it.
Yep, I don't have to now that we're doing everything in the classic editor.
Oh, great. Thanks for converting me back, sir.
Oh, no problem. Yep, this Gutenberg 5.0 stuff just came out within the last couple of days. I'm not sure when it showed up on your site, but it might have happened last night even. I had several clients with GoDaddy hosting that were switched last night.
Yeah, this happened yesterday morning.
Gotcha. Yep. Makes total sense. Okay, so I'm coming down here, and this time I am going to copy your copyright blurb.
Okay.
Because this will be at the very bottom of that new super long article. Okay, and there it is. And I'm scrolling down. So now we have a total of 1,991 words in this new article. And real quick, I'm going to save this draft. I'm not publishing.
Right.
And let's see. I want to take a look at. You've got a number of tags in here, and this is in the category of brain injury recovery. So I'm going to get.
It's ongoing brain injury recovery. Yeah, that one.
Got it. Okay, so we got the category.
Did you get rid of the general? Did you get rid of the general?
Oh yeah, good question. I did not. I neglected to uncheck general. And let's see. See if I can copy these tags. Not sure if I can do this or not.
Actually, what you can do, Brett, is you go to one of the articles. Go to one of the articles.
Ah, yeah. Smart thinking.
Open the article. Open the article on my website. And then the way that I do it is I go down to the bottom and I just copy and paste all the tags out of there, and I just put them into all those tags.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
I just copy all
that
those.
brings in the commas too, which is the thing that I was missing with my method. So yours is definitely a superior method here.
Well, it's a learning curve, right?
Yeah, whereas
that's something that I learned along the way. Right?
There's always a better way.
Now, in terms of, this is the only thing with this particular article. I have a bazillion links to this, the other parts on different Facebook group pages all around. You know,
I see. Right.
LinkedIn and so forth. So if you put in a different,
if we change the URL and people have the old links from those 3 parts, they will get lost and not find this new massive article that we're creating.
Right.
Yes, and that's a good point. I'm grabbing that image again that we had lost temporarily. To add to our, putting this back in. Hang on just a second, and then I will address what you were just mentioning too. Okay. And
I have all this stuff centered rather than blocked to the left.
Gotcha. Well, on this original article, on part one, you had at the top, you had your image with the easel doing that, but I can center it if you like.
No, no, no. I mean, I don't mean, I mean the text. All the text was centered
I see.
in the
Okay.
original. So that's, if you see in this new
I
one?
see. So do you want me to center all the text?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, some of it copied over centered, I see now. But on that first one, because we ran it through the Gutenberg blocks,
Yeah.
it took out that centering. So we'll put the centering back on part one. Okay. Now, we're going to do something slightly different with this text up here because it's not going to mean the same thing. So before you wrote, I divided the article into 3 parts. That
Right.
still stands. And you say, I would encourage you to read all 3 parts. Below part 1 is a link to part 2. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to change this last sentence slightly. I'm going to say, here are quick links to help you jump to part 1, part 2, and part 3. And actually, I'm going to hit return after that. And we're going to turn these into hyperlinks here in a little bit. But we're not all set up for them to receive what we're doing. Okay? And we may even repeat this once we have it all set up.
Right. Without a lot of distraction.
Right.
Per se.
So, and actually, I'm going to move this part 1 that we originally put in here. Oops, I hit the wrong button. I'm going to put that down here. Let's see, where's the best place to put that? So what if, here we go. And we'll get that center aligned in there.
Yeah, getting me back to the classic is so much help. It's helpful because
Yeah, I'm just cleaning up a little bit of the code here
Thanks.
because of that switcheroo. Oops. I'm trying to. Part 1. Okay, so with that, we're going to come in here, and this is where we need to pay attention. So we're going to add a little section in here called an ID. And in this, can you see this little piece here that says ID equals quotes part 1 close quotes, and it's inside this HTML little section in the text editor. So in the old classic version, we have up here we have the visual tab and we have the text tab. And when we go into the text tab, that's when it shows us some of this HTML. And when we add ID equals part 1, and actually I'm going to make that lowercase because just out as a precaution. We could also use something called class equals. And oftentimes this is used for styling purposes when we want to code something with styles, CSS, but that's not what you want here. We want quick jump links. And so now we can come up here to this thing here that's going to become a hyperlink. And we click our hyperlink button up here in the editor. And it gives us this pop-up for the hyperlink. And we type in part 1. Now, you notice it doesn't say http:// and a full hyperlink there.
Right.
All this has is that hashtag, #, and the words that we put in ID. And that's all we need. And while we're at it, we're going to do the same thing for part 2 and part 3, but we'll add their codes for their separately in just a second. So part 2 and part 3. Oops, I have to put in the hashtag. Won't work without the hashtag. Excuse me.
Sure.
So those all now look like hyperlinks. And one of those hyperlinks, part 1, is now connected to this title right there. So when somebody clicks this part 1, when it's on the live page, it will jump them down to this title, and they'll be able to start reading part 1. And after we set up part 2, it will then jump them down to part 2, right here, and so on. So let's.
But then it also has discover, if you've not already read part 1, please click on this link. So are we going to leave those still in there?
So we can help them jump around if they like. So there's a couple ways that we can do this. So I'm going to come in here and select this as a reminder that we have, oops, the selection fell off. I'm hitting, I can't use my cursor on this. I apologize, but I'm going to tell you the keystrokes I'm hitting. I'm hitting the Control C, Command C to copy this little chunk of text. And then I'm going to come down here to where we have part 2 and make a little space there. I'm going to paste that in. And let's enter part 2 while we're at it. And so now we have this start of a new section for part 2. We won't need, as you were just mentioning, we won't necessarily need this. We can leave it if you want, but we don't need it. Because they're going to have what's going to look like a small little menu system here with these 3 links that they can quickly go back to part 1, part 2, part 3.
I'm more inclined because they may not understand what jump means too.
Okay. So in that case, let's
you might say different. You can read part 2 by clicking on each of these parts.
Right. So I'm going to get rid of that by clicking on the something like that. I'm wondering if this text to me almost seems a little more confusing, but
yeah, it does. So I'm not sure exactly how to best train people to be able to do this,
Right.
Simplify it so people don't.
If you have not already read part 1,
because what I try to do is I try to spell things out the best I can so that there's no ambiguity.
Right.
Because people with brain injuries, tend to be concrete literal. So
yep.
I leave that.
For the moment, let's just let's give ourselves space to think about that, and I'll get the technical part of this working some more. So
sure.
As you recall, we had to add that ID equals in here, and so we're going to do that.
I don't know exactly where you're putting all this stuff.
So I just switched over from the visual tab, so I'm on part 2.
Right.
And I'm switching over for this little thing here.
No, I understand that, but how do I know where it's at on the?
So here, as you recall, I added the part 2, the big H1 title.
Right.
And
whereabouts in the HTML do you add that?
So do you see this little section here? Do you see? So this is the H1 that says part 2.
Right. I see that, but there's a lot of other places along the HTML.
Hang on, sorry, my cursor bumped the wrong thing.
No problem.
All right, so there's a lot of other HTML in here, but we only want the part that says part 2 in this header 1. We're going to ignore everything else. This is all we want right there.
Yeah. Brent,
Okay.
how did part 2 find its way in that particular heading?
So as you recall, maybe recall, I added the words, I typed them in part 2 in here, right?
Right.
And then and after I had typed it, I selected this, and from this drop-down menu system, I chose a heading 1.
Okay.
And actually, a heading 2 would actually be better. I did that for visual reasons.
Right.
But for SEO purposes, H2 would be better. And so now that we've got this, it doesn't matter what the header level is. Right after where it says H2, I'm going to hit space and ID equals. I'm going to put in 2 quotes, and I'm going to type part 2, just like that. Make sense? So this is all.
Brent, still, I wish I could move around the cursor too, but there's a lot of HTML code in this when you convert it to text. I don't know where in the HTML code to put in the text, the ID equals.
So I'm saying the place where you're going to do that is right where we've added this part 2. So what we're doing is
I know, but how did you decide to put part 2 in that particular place?
So when we copy pasted your text in, the things that you wrote.
Right.
This is part 2. This thing that I typed here is at the top of the area just before your write-up for part 2 starts.
Right. So that converts. Even though we've not published it, it still shows up in the text.
Yes.
Okay.
So part 2's here at the beginning of your part 2.
Right.
And then we're going to scroll down to where I wrote in part 3, and we're going to format that a little bit. Let's switch over to a header 2. I'm centering it. And again, I have it selected. Then I'm going to hit the text tab.
Okay, so you did select it.
I did select it, and this time my cursor's jumped a little bit, so it's lost me with the Gutenberg stuff. There it is. So let me try it one more time. Part 3. And
it's still not.
It's close. Yeah, I apologize. Gutenberg's added some stuff in here that I haven't seen before recently. So this is a little foreign to me, but
yeah, I'm not criticizing. Please forgive me if that's
no worries. So
like that. I'm just trying to.
There's another way that we could do this, and it might be easier. So we know that we're looking for something that says part 3, correct?
Right.
Okay, so what we can do is when we go in here, if we happen to lose it, like I did a second ago, I could be anywhere in here.
Right.
I can simply hit the Control F button, and I can type part 3. And this will show me the various different places. There's 3 matches, as you might see up here in the upper right-hand corner.
Right.
And I can hit the arrow until I get to the part 3 that is inside an H2. And here we are. It's the last one. And at that point, I'm going to hit done because I've found the thing I'm looking for. And then I'm going to come over here just after the first 2. I'm going to add that ID equals quotes, part 3, close quotes. Now, so we've added that ID thing now onto this header, but we don't have our quick links. So we do want to make it easy for people to navigate in case they've made it to part 3 and they need to move to part 1 or part 2. And so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to copy our text here and come down below part 3 again to help set up the people that have made it this far, or the people that have come into here from some other place. Part 2, and I'm going to add or part 3. And I'm going to say correct link below. I'm not sure if we need this jump part, but I'm going to leave it there for a second because I want to show you something, and then that might help you figure out if we need to use the word jump. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to save the draft. And waiting for that to save. Got some extra tabs there. Close that out. Okay, it's refreshing as it saves. Okay, and now I'm going to preview. This still is not published, and that's okay. We're going to load up the preview. I think this will work in preview, but we'll find out. So this will be a little bit of an experiment.
All right.
So now when we come in here, we have part 1, part 2, part 3. These hyperlinks, they're here right now. They could be up higher, but for SEO purposes, it's probably better that they're not the first bit of text that shows up in this article.
Right.
Okay, so when we come in here, if we click part 1, it bops us down to the start of part 1. Okay, and that feels kind of jumpy to me. So I use the word jump, and some people call these jump links. It's a little bit of slang. If I click part 2, it jumps me down to part 2. And I'm already down here. If I click part 3, this takes me to part 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And if I hit part 1, it takes me back up to part 1. So it's kind of moving us around. Now, where I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. Where is it taking me when I click these links? It's taking me to these titles where we've added the ID equals, a little bit of thing. So if I were to move this title to the very top of the page, it would take us to the very top of the page for part 1. If I were to put part 2 in a slightly different location, it would take us to wherever that location is. And so you can have as many of these, you could have 5 or 6 or 7 parts if you wanted to. Instead of calling them parts, you might call them chapters, or they could be, instead of parts, they might be more descriptive. They could be subtitles. So your part 1 starts off with my experience with brain injury. That could be the thing that we jump to instead of the word part 1. And so part 1 up here could even have that same label. We have all sorts of options. That's a stylistic thing to consider.
Right.
And let me show you, I'm going to show you another thing. I'm going to click on part 2. And I want you to take a look up here in the address bar. Now, we're in a preview, and so our hyperlink up here looks a little funny. It's a preview hyperlink. But at the end of this hyperlink, it's got that little hashtag part 2 that we typed in there. And
okay.
I want you to focus on this address bar up here because I'm going to click part 3 and you'll see that it changes to hashtag part 3. Our hyperlink is slightly changing. It's basically saying, it's continuing to say, go to this page, this hyperlink that currently is a preview link. So there's all this stuff. It's saying, go to this hyperlink, to this page on Craig's website. And once you're on that page, go to this section of that page, part 1.
You know, as I'm looking at this and I'm watching you, it's complicated to me, okay, to try to understand it.
Yeah.
And I have the capacity to reason stuff, but I'm just wondering whether this is going to be daunting for people that have a difficult time following stuff to begin with. Even though it's a SEO, it's going to be good for SEO. I just don't know whether it's going to be best for my audience because, you know, the different cognitive functioning levels.
Yeah, and
that's a concern that I have with it because I'm having a hard time connecting the dots right now just because I have a hard time learning sequences, right?
I hear you. And I'd like to break this up into 2 pieces actually, because you're trying to do something that your audience will not. So you're trying to grasp, one, how do you do this how do you create this effect on your own blog articles when you're writing?
Right.
And also you're trying to grasp, how will my audience interact with this functionality when they visit my site? And that's something that everybody has to cope with regardless of cognitive level, because that's that's what we call user experience or user interface. How are they interacting with this article? And does this type of interaction help them or make them more confused? Now, I would suggest that in general, this is a blog article,
Right.
and at the easiest way to interact with this article is just to scroll and read.
Right.
They never have to click anything.
Right.
If we don't put any of this wording here,
Right.
it would never interrupt their experience, and they could just keep reading by scrolling. For some of the folks that are familiar with links and parts, they might see this. If we were to delete this text, pretend it's not there. I can delete it if that helps. They might see part 2 and they might realize, oh, I've reached a new section. And they'll see what looks like a link, because if they hover over it, it turns into a link.
Right.
They could jump back and reread something if they wanted to, or they could jump ahead. Or maybe they've been here before and they've read all 3 parts, but they want to read part 3 a second or a third time. And they could jump down to part 3 and jump into the solutions one more time.
Right. So what I could do, this could be helpful for folks, and I could just make it more specific. This is what you do if you want to read part 1, click below part 2, click below part 3. But is that the same thing as I've been doing, essentially?
So the thing I would suggest that you consider is potentially coming in here and deleting this extra text. I don't know that you need it anymore when you put all of the text into one big article. I think it can be useful to have these parts. I'm not saying get rid of the parts. I'm saying get rid of this text that describes the parts. Because to simplify things for your audience, if they want to scroll, just let them scroll. And no matter what, they'll know how to scroll probably. They wouldn't have made it this far if they couldn't.
Right. This is the issue, okay?
Uh-huh.
That I've faced, okay, over time, is when I have long articles, people don't read them. Even if I have all the information on one page, they don't read them. That's why I create the different parts to go to a different page.
Right.
That is more manageable for them, Brett. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Even though it benefits me SEO stuff wise, it's not benefiting my readers, the people that I'm trying to help. And that's that's my primary concern.
But there's a trade-off that we're making with this. So you're trying to help the readers that are here.
Right.
And find the thing that works best for the readers that are here.
Right.
And the other thing is, if the SEO is better,
right,
that enables you to bring a bigger audience here, more people that might need this help.
That's an excellent point. So it's just a matter of, I guess, conditioning or training or helping people understand it.
Yeah, from my perspective, I've witnessed your writing improve significantly over the last few years that I've known you. You've done a lot of work, especially in terms of readability. We had talked about it before we started talking here, and right away in this article, I can see that your readability has improved significantly. You may or may not score a perfect each time, and none of us ever will, but I can see a big improvement. And I think one of the things that hurts readability are these things here where we tell people where to go and click and what they should keep reading or what they shouldn't. I would suggest that we could just let them, they know what's best for themselves and let them figure it out. And so my recommendation, and this is more a hypothesis than a recommendation. My hypothesis is that if we got rid of this text, it would help people a little bit because they would just keep scrolling and there would be fewer interruptions.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
And for the people that do want to jump back and forth, maybe they get down to the start of part 3 and they realize, what was part 1 about? I need to refresh my memory because they've just absorbed part 2. And they can do that. easily with these links. So these links are helpful.
Oh,
They do
yeah.
help people jump around and review things that they might need. And if they, if they can even share those links if they want. They could come in here and they could copy this hyperlink for part 2 and say, oh, you got to check out part 2. It was really excellent in this article. Or I really found the solutions in part 3 to be helpful. And maybe they're sharing it with a friend that already knows stuff about part 1 and part 2, but hasn't seen these particular solutions.
Okay, so that makes it, yeah. Now, I really appreciate you going over this stuff. I have to do things like on a repetitive basis to be able to click, and I'm really not sure how to do these, the
ID
hashtag stuff. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
I understand, and it takes practice, and that's why we're recording this, so that you can go back to this, or as you look at the video, you could take notes if you need to, and you may use this or you may not use this. You might give it a try, or you might not, and you might determine that this is helpful, or you might just let this go as something that isn't helpful. That's something that you're going to have to decide for yourself. And I'll be honest, I've been doing web development for a long time, but this is one of those little steps that sometimes escapes me, and I'll still have to go do a Google search on it because I get a couple pieces of this mixed up myself from time to time. But I am finding that it's a lot more useful to use in blog articles lately, and since I've been using it more in that regards, it becomes easier.
If you're able to, like you said earlier, could you do the without me interrupting, could you go ahead? This may also be helpful for people that are listening, to this in the future. Can you go over how to do those, the part 1, the hashtag, et cetera, stuff again?
All over again? Sure, yeah. Sure. So let's see. Let me come back in here. And
to begin with, you see there's a space between the poster and above it. What I try to do is just not have any spaces. There's extra spaces.
Oh, yep. And this was from that Gutenberg thing too. So there's some extra stuff up here. So I'm going to get rid of that space thing.
So I'm not going to have to deal with Gutenberg, this type of coding stuff in the future. I'm just going to be able to do what I used to do.
That was right. No, we've fixed that already. So you shouldn't, you won't be seeing that in the future, unless you turn that plugin off, the one that's the classic editor plugin. If you turn that off, then Gutenberg will come back.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do that,
Yep. So, so I will rework this one more time, and I'm going to, for this example, I'm going to take out this text just so that we can see it, what it looks like. It can always be added back because this is a draft article. This is a copy off of your original. And
right. You see how there's spaces in between,
Yeah, I do. And, sometimes a little space is helpful.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it helps to give people a little break as they digest what they've just read.
Right.
And I think you're doing infinitely better with the way you style and write these days, the way you're using bold in some of your words, different sections, adding images throughout the articles. You've come a long way with all of this.
Thanks.
These are, stylistically, when we write, we've got to get people to read. Sometimes we have to break things up, change things around. Sometimes, there's not necessarily a wrong way, but if we do the same thing over and over and over again, people they'll start to tune that out just like they would an advertisement or something too.
Hey, Brick, if you scroll down, you see how those images right there, scroll up, they're to the left. Is that a Gutenberg thing, or can I just go ahead and change it, or is the code already?
I think that was a Gutenberg thing. If they were supposed to be centered, oops, I'm doing I was saving that draft again.
You see those things? Can I
put those back in the middle?
I mean, can I do that with that? And how does it affect the code that Gutenberg is? How you had to delete the code?
Not something that we have to worry about. It's just something that when I tried to center all, it just didn't grab images. It did text only.
Okay.
I just missed a step there. So
No, you're fine. I just asking, sir. You see,
Okay.
there's a space between my experience and part one.
Yep. So
Uh,
you want that closed up a little bit?
yeah,
Okay, so we can do
but
that.
but
And
yeah,
so simply backspace up
yeah,
now. And you would ask for a new another example
right.
of the hashtag. So I'm going to do that
Okay,
slightly differently than what we did before. So you recall, oops, let's see, where is that? My cursor's jumping here, so I apologize.
no problem.
Um,
And you see how it's the what if nothing? It seems like it's still blocked in Gutenberg style.
what's
Maybe
that?
scroll down. You see what's wrong? It's got a line above it. You see
Yep.
where it's got that partial
That's
line?
yeah, there's I was wondering about that too. I was block image center. Yeah, there's a separator. Here it is.
I mean, I typically do put in, lines in between to kind of separate to help people have info, but I don't know how much of this article is affected by Gutenberg if we try to
Yeah, and
publish.
this is just a draft. You won't run into this again if you repeat any of this. So on your title here, so this is your subtitle for your article, right? You
Well,
have
it's
this is your main title.
right,
And then for part one, you kick off with this subtitle, My Experience with Brain Injury. And then you
right,
have another subtitle, What I Shared with the Professional,
right,
and some others, right?
right,
So if we wanted to, we could put a link on every single one of these. I'm not recommending it. We could have something that looks like a table of contents at the top that jumps people down to each one of these sections. That's a little overkill because these are not long sections. But if they were longer, they could be. So let's pretend that this is a three-part article.
right.
For example purposes of the technical stuff, let's pretend that this is a 5-part article. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm going to add part 4, and I'm going to add part 5.
Okay,
So, and I'm going to do this below the copyright, but I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put part 4 and part 5.
okay,
And if we had additional parts, there would be some text here. So filler text would go here, and we'd probably have a good bit of it. So I'm just going to copy paste in something that is supposed to mimic a couple paragraphs.
right. Okay,
And we would have that for each one of these. So I'm going to copy that. And so now we have part 4 and part 5.
right,
Okay, so part 4, I'm going to set up with a heading.
right,
And part 5 can do the same thing. When we set up that heading, it creates just that little bit of HTML with the H2,
okay,
the heading 2. And just like it did that one time, our cursor kind of went in the middle of all this. So I'm going to search, not for part 3 this time, but for part 4. So I did a Control F to find it. And up here in the right-hand corner, I've got the word part 4, and then it found that code for me, right?
wait a minute. How did you put in part 4 and that's how it found it?
Yes, I typed in up here in the right-hand corner, I typed part 4.
But what did you control? Do I have to do a control whatever?
So the command for me to search within a page, I have a Mac, so it's Command 5. I think you have a PC, correct?
Yeah.
So for you, it would be the Control button and the letter F. Hold Control down and hit F, and it allows you to search for any word or any characters on a page when you're on a website.
Okay, Control
F.
plus F to
search for any words on a page. In this case, we're looking for the words part 4.
okay. Okay.
And when we did that, let me know when you're looking at the screen again. Make sure I don't lose you.
Okay, I'm looking at the screen.
Okay, so we found part 4 in this with our H2. And so we're going to come in here, and right after the 2, we're going to hit the space button, and we're going to type ID equals quotes part 4, no spaces in there, just part 4, and close the quotes and add a space, and then we're done. And since we're already here, we remember that we had a couple paragraphs, right, of filler text. So filler text, there was one paragraph.
Yeah, right.
And then we had another filler text paragraph.
Right.
And then right after that, we had part 5.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to go to that H2 again, and we're going to type ID equals. Do you remember what I'm going to type after the quotes?
Part 5.
You got it. Part 5. And close the quotes.
And a space.
And a space. And then I'm going to click it back to the visual tab and look at things just to visually check it. Looks good. I don't see any noticeable errors or anything like that.
You mean changes?
Yeah, or anything that just doesn't look right. You know, no HTML code gone wrong, or everything looks fine. And so
how would I know if any HTML code went bad?
You might not, but if you see a bunch of stuff that doesn't look like words that you've written, that might be HTML code.
Okay.
And so we've got a part 4 and a part 5, and I want to scroll all the way to the top of our article. And almost there. I'm at the top of our article, up here. And I'm going to hit space. Now, I'm using what's called a pipe character, but it could be anything. I could use a dash. So I have this little funny character just to separate these. I could use a dash, but I use something called a pipe. A dash is a little easier to remember and speak. So we could have dashes, and I'm going to type part 4, space dash, and part 5, because we've got these additional parts that we want to add. So after I've typed the words, these are just words, these are not hyperlinks yet, and you know how to add a hyperlink.
All right.
But just as a reminder, what we're going to put in there, I'm going to come up here to the menu system, and I'm going to hit the Insert a Hyperlink button. And since we're highlighted on part 4, I'm going to hit that hashtag lowercase part 5. I'm sorry, part 4. You caught me. I made a mistake. And then we're going to go to part 5, which is still text, and we're going to click the Insert a Hyperlink button again, hashtag part 5, and hit the Enter button. And we have I just selected and copied all of that, and I'm going to come down to our menu system for part 2. Select all that, and I'm going to paste it over with the new thing, and we'll do the same thing for part 3 so that it's uniform and the same throughout, and people can easily jump to the section that they need to be in. And we don't have it at all here, and our part 4 is not centered, so we'll center it while we're down here. Same thing for part 5. I'm pasting it in, and we'll center part 5 to match. And I'll scroll up so that I can save this. Wait for that to refresh.
Thanks so much for doing this, Brett.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no, I'm happy to help. So I'm gonna preview it again, and we'll let that load up in the preview. There's the preview. Remember, we had looked at the hyperlinks. There's our preview link without any parts in it. And as we scroll down, we now have part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we'll click on part 4, and it jumps us down to part 4. Right. And if we want to jump to part 5, there's part 5. And if we want to go back to part 2, we have possibilities. Or if we want to go to part 1, And remember, and this is, it takes us to this particular word for part 1. It doesn't take us up here because we didn't tell it to. If we placed part 1 up here, then it would take us all the way to the very top of the article. Does that make sense?
Right.
So that was a choice that we made. And it could be a choice that we could change. It doesn't have to stay that way.
Right.
So that is the hashtag thing. Now, you had asked about what if people know of our past links. So in this particular example, we have already published blog posts with 3 parts. And if we wanted to replace those, we could. We don't have to. You could use this technique going forward and you wouldn't have to change anything. Or we could look at, you've written many multi-part articles in the past. You could consider consolidating those to see if you would improve your traffic with this SEO improvement of combining the words together. And
yeah, there's a, I have like 1,700 articles over time.
right.
It's just, I think I'm going to do this going forward. Otherwise, I'd get, it's when we
Yep. Well,
remember I did change all those links. It's just very time consuming.
it would be time consuming. So I'm not recommending it, but it would be possible to do that if you wanted to on some of those old ones. Maybe it's not all of them. Maybe it's 1 or 2.
Right.
But if we were to do, I don't want to muddy the waters too much teaching you how to do something you don't need to know how to do, but we could revisit that in a different video sometimes, how to consolidate those links into one. It is possible, and you already have the tools in your site through a different plugin we put in a long time ago to help make that easy.
Which is?
It's, so in your article in WordPress, under tools, you have a tool called Redirection.
Right.
And as you may recall, that's sort of like an automated detour sign. If somebody tries to go to a link that we have moved into another, when they click on that link anywhere else in the internet to come to our website says that link doesn't exist anymore. We're going to send you on a detour to the new place it is located.
Right.
And so we could consolidate our other articles, part 1, part 2, and part 3. We could consolidate all of those together using a detour into some new single article if we wanted to. Yeah.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't think that I get a whole lot of readership, So, and what I'm doing is I am just providing a resource. I feel like, for various reasons, I'm a forerunner,
Yep.
I feel like I am contributing something that people haven't caught up to yet or understand the value of it yet. So it's more of a resource. Your thoughts, you were saying?
Well, it's been a while since I've looked at your stats. I'm taking a quick look here, and I think you've made some progress in that regards too. Today you had 59 people view your site.
Well, we've been that was because of the new article on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Unless I post a new article and I add it to different Facebook pages.
Yep.
People don't necessarily come to my website.
Well, that's sometimes how it goes. Sometimes they've seen the old one. Sometimes they explore when they're there. Sometimes they don't. But you've had, your best day ever was 348 views.
Right.
You've had almost 55,000 views in total since you started. And I believe, to correct, that's not since you started blogging, because at one point in time you were on WordPress.com and you moved into your own site. So this is just since we started tracking the stats through this new system. So I see some progress there too. This is, these numbers have come up, and I see in some cases there's a small number of views on any given day. That might be a day when nothing was published. And then when you do publish, from looking at these numbers real roughly, it's looking like anytime you publish something, you're getting about 50 views. Some days a lot better, some days maybe a little smaller, but that's 50 people a day that you're helping. They may not be the same 50. and odds are they are definitely not the same 50.
Right.
But you're pulling in about 50 people, helping them with something each time you publish something, and that's no small number. That's pretty decent, especially if if it's a different group of 50 each time.
Right.
You've probably got a core audience of at least 1,000 or so people, and you get 50 people from that audience each time you publish something.
Right.
And that's it's a bit of a guess.
Yeah.
But not a, it's not too far off. Looking at the monthlies, you're at about, let's see, about 1,500 people a month right now. You've got your better months, and you got a couple lower months, and that might also have something to do with when you were publishing more or less, and that's okay too. So,
I notice also, some of the articles like the living with a brain injury, that I didn't publish that. I published that, several years ago. So I'm just reposting stuff in Facebook for people that are new or people that could benefit from it.
Yeah, no, you got to put it in the stream all over again. If you were fishing literally in a real stream, and you threw some bait in and it floated on downstream, you couldn't expect to catch a fish up where you first threw it. You'd have to recast. And so that's what you're doing with republishing. And a lot of your content is what they call evergreen. It can be used or viewed or read, or people can benefit from it any time of the year, and maybe almost any year. It doesn't go out of style or out of fashion or any of that. It's something that can help significantly. Someday, maybe 100 years from now, when people maybe develop medical technology that solves and heals all brain injuries instantly, and also helps people deal with their emotions and healing emotionally as well, your content may not necessarily help people anymore. But we don't live in a society right now where brain injuries can be healed instantly, and we don't live in a world where people have full control over their emotions and how to manage their own emotional and mental health and how to do all those things. So you're helping people with that right now, and I suspect it's going to be a long time before people don't need that help. I would love to be wrong about that.
I talk about holistic, body, soul, spirit, emotion, stuff that I do with neuroplasticity and with just encouraging people on a lot of different levels. So it's maybe stuff that the medical model and the brain injury industry has necessarily adopted because it doesn't make them money or they're not aware of it. So anyway, I'm doing what I feel like God's leading me to do and trust in the process,
Yeah, your site's growing, your readership's growing, and you are growing with the way that you do all of these things. So,
hey, could you do me a favor if you have the time? Just look to see if that's all those different the attacks that I have to my website. There was something in the